On today's episode of the JAS Takhar podcast, episode 276, I answer the question, as a first-time real estate investor, what type of property do I suggest that you invest into? And as an entrepreneur slash salesperson, if you're going through a sales slump, which we all have, how do you get out of it? All right, my beautiful, beautiful Bobo. Let's get started with the first question.
Let's go. We have a question from Olivia from Denver. She says, "Hi, Jazz. I've been considering starting a side hustle alongside my real estate business. How do you manage multiple ventures without losing focus?"
Well, big shout out to our fans in Denver. I've never been yet, so if you know of a real estate brokerage that might be looking for some type of training hands-on, reach out to us. In terms of your question, I actually do have multiple businesses as well as kind of a side hustle as well. So I have a real estate company with about 42 agents. I have a coaching academy, Fitigu Academy, where we have coaching clients right across North America in helping them become better business people from a real estate professional perspective. And then that side hustle kind of being my personal brand. The brand of JAS Takhar is now getting around on stages. And so I completely understand the trouble and the obstacle of being focused, especially someone like myself. I'm sometimes a dog who kind of sees a squirrel and I'm all over the place. And so my answer to you would be, first and foremost, look at yourself and get to a place of self-awareness of how do you work well. Let me explain what I mean by that. So for me to focus, and the reason I told you about all the kind of three things that I'm up to at a very high level of importance to me, the real estate company, the coaching academy, and my personal brand. I mean, aside from my actual personal life, these are like at the utmost of priorities, and there's so many tasks that need to get done. For me, and this is not going to work for everyone, and it's not to say that I'm right doing it like this. I just feel like it's right for me, hence the getting and being self-aware. I like to juggle a bunch of these balls at the same time. I like the chaos of, in one moment, I'm doing a podcast like this. I'm in my studio now. I just came from finishing the morning with my coaching clients who come to like an in-person training here in Toronto. And after this now, I'm going to be bombarded with phone calls and email and texts from my real estate clients, investors, home buyers, home sellers. And so for me, I like the chaos. In fact, sometimes I come into my office, we got a couple of TVs and there's no news allowed, especially in my office. I try to protect my crew when it comes to like negativity. But like if it's too quiet, I'm generally the guy that's probably making the ruckus. Why? I just don't like quietness. I like music. I want people speaking. I want people collaborating. That intangible feeling of energy, you can't touch it, but I definitely can feel it. So for me, I like the chaos. Now, most people that I've come across don't work like that, and that's okay. If you're one of these people, then what you have to do, it's very important, okay? It's boring, but I think you're going to come to realize in life, it's the boring, mundane stuff that start to accumulate and compound to give you success in what you're looking for. It's the fact that, look, it's not going to see a dentist twice a year, every 6 months to get the cleaning that keep your teeth nice and clean and fresh and healthy. It's the fact that you got to brush your teeth twice a day. It's mundane. The mundane that I'm talking about is you have to time block. So if you have a couple of businesses you're running, you have a side hustle, maybe you have to figure out, okay, well, on Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays, I need to focus on my side hustle 3 hours a day. Time block that. And then if you have a full-time real estate business, you will be very, very surprised. Okay, I know you might not be able to envision this right now, but I'm speaking from 20 years of experience helping thousands of agents with this exact strategy. So it will work. You just don't see it yet for yourself, possibly. Which is, if a client calls you from 6 to 9 in the evening, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and they want to see a home, putting aside the importance of doing an offer, as well as like they can only see the property because they're going on vacation. If you tell the client, I'm busy from 6 to 9 on Wednesday, client, how's Thursday at noon or how's Friday at 2 p.m.? You will be surprised how many people say, you know what, the Thursday works. So you can only do that though if you have it blocked off in your calendar that you're working on something else. And so the best way to be effective, and I emphasize the word effective because a lot of people talk about being efficient, important. I just believe it's more important to be effective. Why? Well, if me and you were climbing up a wall and I got up the wall faster than you, I was more efficient. And some would say, well, you were also more effective, Jazz. You got up the wall quicker. Yes, but if we realized the whole time I climbed up the wrong wall, because that's not where the pot of gold was sitting, and it took you longer to get up the right wall, who was more effective? Obviously you. And so the way to know what's going to be more effective is trying both out. You kind of probably know in your gut, right? With a question like this that comes in, you kind of already probably losing focus. So you're probably not someone like me, and that doesn't make you wrong. It also doesn't make me wrong the way that I'm doing it. But that means that you're going to need to time block and stick to it. And just understand, you're allowed to have flexibility. I'm not saying stick to it 100%, not having flexibility when the client in your real estate business says, I need to see the house. Be flexible. Put in the extra hours a little later or a little earlier on the side hustle. And then one more important thing before we get off this question. Don't be so hard on yourself. Meaning, when you're tired, just because Instagram or TikTok or whatever it is, YouTube tells you that you gotta grind, and if you're not grinding and working and if you're sleeping more than 4 hours, you're not gonna be successful. And then when you go through the tiredness and your mind is not as sharp, you start to then judge yourself like, maybe I'm not good enough and maybe this is not gonna work. Look, maybe that kind of hustle porn works for other people. I can tell you for most people it doesn't. It's not sustainable. It's not sustainable because your body needs rest. And if you're in business, I can tell you your mind needs the rest. So the best way to do that, unless you're someone that just likes the chaos and like myself, I don't mind. I know sometimes that, oh shoot, I kind of given too much time to the side hustle. Oh shoot, I haven't given no love to the side hustle, and it's all about the real estate company, and the coaching academy is now not bringing in revenues, or vice versa. I've gone through all of it. All those 3 examples, guys, happens to me on a regular basis. But I'm like, you know what? It's okay, because I ended up giving more love to the real estate company, for example, because that's just where my energy went. And that's okay. In the big scheme of things, it's not the end of the world, right? You're allowed to have moments, seasons in life where you're just going to give a little bit more to something than the alternative, and just be okay with that. But what's next?
We have a question from Ethan from Toronto. When you're in a sales slump, what's the first thing you focus on to get back on track?
Love this question because somebody who's been in sales for a very long time, you know that you go through periods where you have sales slumps. And I always reference in my mind, first and foremost, and then what I like to remind people about is something I heard Wayne Gretzky, and I wasn't the biggest Wayne Gretzky fan. I was more of a Mario Lemieux fan, hence why now I'm a massive Sidney Crosby fan. I'm a Pittsburgh Penguin kind of guy. But you know, it's hard to debate that Wayne Gretzky is not the best of all time. You'd call him the GOAT. And I heard him say this. I was probably about 15, 16 years old. And so I was in the sales industry in some capacity at that age. And I heard him say that The way that he gets over sales slumps is understanding that he's not as great as when he's scoring 4 or 5 points a game, and he's not as bad as when he's going through a slump where a couple of games he didn't even get a point, meaning no goal, no assist. He always got his mindset to a place where he's somewhere in between. And so what that did for him was to let him know to always get back to basics in playing hockey, meaning I gotta still continuously practice. I'm probably just holding the stick too tight now because I'm feeling the pressure, and this is him speaking, I'm feeling the pressure of not scoring a point. The media is talking about it. I'm letting down my team. I'm letting down myself. We're not gonna be able to make the playoffs. And so what he started to do more is just remind himself, as well as tactically get to a place of just basic, meaning let's get the puck out of our zone as quickly as possible, the defensive zone. Let's get it to the neutral zone. That's where I'll start to see some more people open, and where he made his money in terms of like where he scored a lot of points and got an assist. I think he's probably still, there's nobody who's done this as well as him, and this is part of him getting to the basics, is behind the net. He played majority of the game behind the net. That was his office. You know, he stick handled himself out of a telephone booth in that area for sure. And so what I would advise to someone who's going through a sales slump now is just get yourself to basics, meaning that when you're in the slump, it's tough. Mentally, it's tough. Financially, it's tough. But that's when a lot of salespeople make rookie mistakes. Rookie mistakes meaning that that's when they start to pressure people. Not a good idea. Just make your phone calls. In today's day and age, here's the basics. Make your phone calls. Don't have commission breath, meaning pushing people on those phone calls. Just touch base with them. Ask them if they need any help from a concierge perspective, plumber, electrician, that opens up conversations. Then ask if they're wanting to do some type of financial checkup from the neck up, a real estate action plan. If not, stick to the basics still. Invite them, which is the second part that is very fundamental. Invite them to an event that you're putting on, hopefully every quarter, or a webinar that you're putting on every month. Yeah, I know it's a lot of work, but that's what's going to differentiate you from 99% of the people, hence why you'll be in the top 1%. Just invite them. You're just taking people through the process, and still consistently put out content, because you don't know which video is gonna hit. So, or which post is gonna resonate with somebody. So the easiest way to get out of a sales slump is get yourself to what you know works well. And if you don't know what works well, what I've been telling you, those 3 things: reaching out to people, making sure that you're inviting them to the events, and putting out social media content.
We have a question from Priya from Calgary. The question says, I'm noticing that my clients are taking longer to make decisions, especially in this market. What's your approach to keeping clients engaged without pushing them too hard?
It's making phone calls and reaching out to them and asking them what their plans are. And when they say to you, Priya, that we're not ready yet, have empathy and understand. Meaning that first and foremost, it's not your money. And I know why you want them to transact quicker. I get it, but that's kind of selfish. And I know that we need to get better from a skills perspective to convert people, but there's another strategy, which is called principles of plenty. When you have a lot of clients and some of them take long, you don't care, because you know that they'll end up making a decision one way or the other in terms of moving forward or not. But when you have a lot of people, it doesn't bother you. I was just walking down the hallway, and my boy Tristan in our office, he saw me, he's like, Jazz, man, how do you stay just so like calm through it all? And you never really seem that frustrated. And I was like, look, I mean, that's not a 100% accurate observation. I mean, there's times I'm very frustrated with home and myself and whatever it may be, with my team and just the market in general. But I know in the big scheme of things, I woke up today, my kids are healthy, that everything else is kind of a bonus. And so what I just focus on is, let me just meet more people. That's been my thesis in business. which is meet as many people as possible, because some will, some won't. So what? Someone is waiting. And so you can't convince anyone. Not in 2025. You can't convince. The question that we get so much on social media and on the podcast is a derivative or some type of it's coming out of the question and the focus of how do I convince people? You're wrong. You cannot convince people. They'll smell it. They'll smell it from a mile away. You're so much better at just having a lot more people. Like the analogy that I'll use right now is if you bought a bag of apples, there's a really good chance there's gonna be one in there that is not gonna be ripe. It might even be rotten. Now the rotten one, it's a very good idea to get that in the garbage because then it's gonna get to the others. We still have some clients or prospects like that are just driving us around like we're Uber, having us drive around like we're Uber drivers because we haven't taken the time to qualify and ask the right questions. And I'll give you a question to also help possibly move people along the process quicker. But the mindset first needs to be that you're not trying to convince people. When you have a lot of something, you don't mind when you lose something. Let me say that again. When you have a lot of something, and you lose some of that, you don't care as much. It doesn't affect you because you're like, bro, there's 14 apples, 3 of them got bad. I still got 11 left, right? So principles of plenty. Question that I would tell you to ask your clients that are maybe taking a while, and you got to go back to my past podcasts. It's not a shameless plug. It's just that I've given a lot of content around how do you show properties. There's a process to that you bring along people for the ride, literally speaking. And then there's questions that you can ask that make the decision making easier for them. See how I said that? Easier for them. So go back to my other podcasts because people have asked questions, how do I show homes? How do I get listings and all that kind of stuff? But the question I would ask when someone's taken a while would be, Bo, the prospect, what is it about the properties that we saw that you didn't like? What about the properties we saw that you didn't like? That's for a buyer. You have an investor, Bo, what about the properties that I brought to you what about those properties that I brought to you from an income property perspective or an investment perspective haven't you liked? Let him speak. That's why we start the question with what. I want him to answer and speak. Okay? And when he tells you what he tells you, well, I'm not ready right now or something. Great, you already know. Okay, he's not ready. But you're going to uncover something there. If it's a seller who's listed too high and they're not willing to bring down the price, then you really don't have a client. Because they're being unrealistic. It's why when you have a seller or a buyer or investor, at some point you should always be asking the question right at the start, by the way, Bo, the prospect, why do you want to sell? Bo, the prospect, why do you want to buy? And why do you want to invest? Because the why, his answer is his motivation. And so when they're taking long, a prospect, you got to bring them back to that. Hey, and then it's easy. Hey, Bo, remember when I asked you like why? And I know you mentioned because you need to downsize or you need to get a bigger home because you have kids coming. Prices are going to start moving upwards at some point. If this current market, I don't care where you are in North America, the numbers just came in recently, as recent as yesterday, in fact. At the time of this recording, December of 2024, November's numbers have come in. Okay, sales volumes have increased year over year in the major cities by 40%. That's huge sales volume. That means the small little incremental interest rate decreases in our country in Canada, they're starting to now actually affect activity. I think there's another big one coming in terms of an interest rate very shortly, decrease. And so even in all of North America, I think you're going to start to see sales volume pick up. When sales volume picks up, prices go up. And so you want to make sure that you educate your clients.
We have a question from Carlos from Miami. Do you think it's better to hire a virtual assistant or handle admin tasks yourself when you're just starting out as an entrepreneur? I'm trying to weigh the cost versus the time saved.
Yeah, as a new entrepreneur, I highly recommend that you get help with the stuff that you don't like to do as quickly as possible, because it's going to weigh you down from a time perspective as well as from a mental bandwidth perspective. Because as a new entrepreneur, whatever business you're in, you need to think about bringing in business, bringing in money, bringing in revenues, bringing in customers. That has to be the highest priority, not the only priority, but the highest priority. And so everything that takes time, even at the start, as a new entrepreneur, as a beginner in real estate, whatever it may be, you want to delegate the rest of the stuff. In terms of when you're weighing your options, I would always go in person, like an assistant beside me, but that's costly at the start. So the answer would be yes. Consider getting a virtual assistant with the mundane tasks of maybe it's a calendar setup, maybe it's appointment booking, maybe it's accounting work. Anything that you don't like to do should be delegated as quickly as possible, so you have the energy to do, as well as to come up with creative ideas of bringing in more money.
We have a question from Mia in Seattle. Hi Jazz, I've been thinking about investing in real estate myself, but I don't know where to start. Would you recommend buying pre-construction or focusing on resale property for a first investment?
So as a first investment, I mean, if I could wave a magic wand, it would be a multiplex, in all honesty, because a multiplex investment, there's a huge advantage. There's scales of economy, right? Because you have multiple tenants in the property, but you only have one roof. You only have one furnace most of the time. And so if you have a 5-unit building, one tenant leaves, you still have 4 helping with the cost. However, with that said, as a first-time investor, most of the time with my 20 years of experience helping investors, you might not have the capital. And so a pre-construction condo, for example, in most cities around the world, they allow you to they meaning the builder, allows you to invest into the property by making installments for your down payment. So the way that it looks is like it's 5% down in the first 30 days, 5% down in 6 months or a year. It's laid out over time, so it becomes a forced savings plan. And so as a new investor, myself as well, when I got starting with investing into real estate, that's the route that I went, because it just was easier. It was very, very passive. It's actually very boring. It's like watching paint dry, because all you're doing is writing some checks for a deposit, for the down payment in installments, but it allows you to get your foot in the door. And then some would say, well, that's a bad investment. It's a condo. Look, it's not as, in my opinion, lucrative as a multiplex. But if you can't get into the multiplex and you have maybe $20,000, $30,000 lying around, and you are someone that has shown the ability and capability to save money, then you might as well get into the market now. Have a forced savings plan. You can sell that pre-construction condo before it gets built. You can, depending on how the market is, and then you can also rent it out for a year afterwards and then sell it. You have some exit strategies there. But as a first-time investor, the question that really I get started with people is, how much capital do you currently have? Because that's going to determine a lot. So the question to you, our friend in, I believe, Miami, is how much capital do you have? And do you want to be more of a passive investor or an active investor? Active meaning, like, are you going to maybe add an income suite to the property? Are you going to tear down the property and build, something bigger? Do you want to be passive, like a pre-construction condo? Maybe it's investing into like a land development deal / investing into a real estate investment trust because you don't have a lot of capital right now currently, or you just want to be hands off. You don't want to worry about the tenants and the toilets. You just want to make sure that, hey, you're seeing a higher return than you are in your bank account right now or some GIC. So it starts with how much capital you have, and then there would be what type of investor do you want to be. But make no, qualms about it. I think the best investment in real estate is multiplex investing. It's just tougher to get in at the start. Yes, you can do a joint venture with other people, but as a first investment in real estate, that's a lot to, swallow at the start. You generally should, my recommendation is, generally work up the investment ladder. You can skip some rungs on the ladder, but don't don't bite off more than you can chew, as the saying goes. As always, if this episode was valuable, share it with a friend, a colleague, a neighbor, and to ask your question on the Jazz Takhar podcast, all you gotta do is go to meetjazztakhar.com/podcast. I'll see you next week.